Three numbers, one black screen, 172, 13,000, 0. 172 is the number of days Nancy Guthrie has been missing from her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona. 13,000 is the number of tips the FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department have logged since February 7th. And 0 is the number of named suspects in this case. As of the recording of this video, on the 22nd of July, 2026, 0. Not a person of interest, not a nickname, not a partial description, 0. And this morning, a source close to the investigation told NewsNation's Brian Entin something the family has not been told publicly. The FBI is not waiting for a break anymore. They are going back to the beginning. They are re-interviewing every witness from day one, re-canvassing every neighbor, reprocessing every piece of physical evidence from the porch itself. In the language of investigators, that is called a reset. In the language of the family, it is called something much colder. It means the leads are gone. And the case that was supposed to be solved by Easter has quietly, on day 172, been rolled back to February 7th. Let me show you what those three numbers actually mean, because the math is the story. Every missing person investigator in the United States knows about the 6-month wall. It is not written in any law. It is not printed in any training manual. But it is a statistical reality that every FBI agent who works a kidnapping case treats as gospel. The 6-month wall is the point in a missing adult case where the probability of a live recovery drops off a cliff. According to Department of Justice figures compiled through 2024, 97% of missing adults who are recovered alive are recovered within the first 6 months. 97. The remaining 3% of live recoveries are spread out over the next 20 years combined. Nancy Guthrie is on day 172. That is 5 days past the 6-month wall, 5 days past the 97% line. And the investigators working her case, the ones who have been living inside those numbers for their entire careers, know exactly what that means. It does not mean she is dead. It means the shape of the case has changed. Recovery, in the language of the Bureau, has quietly become the more likely word than rescue. And that is not something the family has been told in a press conference. It is something the calendar has told them, one day at a time, since February. 13,000 tips. That is the number the FBI tip line and the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed at the last joint press briefing. Now let me walk you through what actually happens to a number like that, because 13,000 sounds like a mountain of information. It is not. It is a funnel, and most of the funnel is dust. Of every 1,000 tips a major missing person tip line receives, the averages based on FBI internal training materials that have been made public through Freedom of Information requests break down roughly like this. About 400 are duplicates. Someone saw a news story and called in the same detail they saw on television. Another 300 are what agents call sighting tips. I saw a woman who looked like her at a gas station in Nevada. Almost none of these are actionable. Another 200 are speculation. Psychics, dream interpreters, people who think the neighbor did it because the neighbor was rude at a barbecue once. About 50 are what agents call malicious tips. Trolls, fake leads, attempts to disrupt the investigation. That leaves roughly 50 tips out of every 1,000 that carry any real investigative weight. On a case with 13,000 tips, that is roughly 650 leads worth chasing. Now here is the harder math. Of those 650, historical averages say maybe 10 to 15 will reach the level of active pursuit. And of those 10 to 15 on average, one becomes an arrest. In the Guthrie case, 172 days in, that one has not happened yet. The funnel has emptied, and the bottom of it so far is dry. There is a difference in the language of federal law enforcement between no suspects and no persons of interest. And that difference is exactly where the Guthrie case is stuck right now. A suspect is a specific individual against whom the government believes it has evidence of a specific crime. A person of interest is someone whose behavior, location, or connection to the victim is significant enough that agents want to talk to them, but the evidence has not risen to the level of probable cause. Most active investigations have persons of interest by the end of the first week, not always publicly named, but privately, internally, they exist. The Guthrie investigation, according to the same NewsNation source, has cycled through several persons of interest since February 7th. A neighbor across the street, a landscaper who had worked the property in January, a delivery driver whose route included the block. Each one was interviewed. Each one was cleared. And as of this week, sources are saying the internal person of interest list, the one that never appears in a press release, is also empty. That is what zero really means. Not just no names on the outside, no names on the inside either. The board is clean, and a clean board on day 172 is not a fresh start. It is a warning light. NewsNation's Brian Entin has been covering this case since the first 48 hours. He is not a rumor reporter. He does not chase speculation. And in his broadcast this week, he laid out what a source close to the investigation told him in one clean paragraph. Quote, "The team is going back to basics. Everyone gets re-interviewed. Everything gets retested. We are treating this like day one." End quote. That is a reset. That is the FBI, in plain language, admitting that the leads they built up over the last 24 weeks have not produced. And they are throwing them out. Not because they were bad, because they didn't move. Now, resets are not automatically bad. In the Delphi murders in Indiana, the case sat cold for years before a routine re-interview by a fresh set of agents surfaced the tip that led to an arrest. In the Golden State Killer case, decades of dead ends collapsed in a single week when a new team started over with a different methodology. Resets work, sometimes, but they work slowly. And every day the case spends in reset is a day it is not spending in pursuit. That is the trade-off. And the family is living inside that trade-off right now, whether they know it or not. You cannot talk about the reset without talking about the friction between Sheriff Chris Nanos of Pima County and FBI Director Kash Patel, because that friction is inside the reset now. Every re-interview being conducted this week is happening under a shared federal-local task force that was, in the first 96 hours of the case, not functioning cleanly. That gap, the one that cost the Nest doorbell footage, is now the exact gap the reset is trying to close. Sources are saying the FBI has quietly taken the lead on all new witness interviews. Deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department are still involved, but in a support role. That is a shift. And it is a shift that Sheriff Nanos publicly has not acknowledged. In his last press briefing, he still described the investigation as a joint operation. Behind the scenes, the joint has thinned. And the reset is, in part, an institutional way of saying we are going to do this the federal way from now on, whether the county likes it or not. That is not a scandal. It is a course correction. But it is a course correction that has cost real time. And Nancy Guthrie does not have real time to spare. Savannah Guthrie appeared on the Today Show yesterday. She did not discuss the case on air. She has not for weeks, but she was there. She was working. And in a green room conversation reported by an Us Weekly insider, she reportedly told a colleague that the family, quote, still believes she is coming home. Still believes. Present tense. In July, on day 172. That is the emotional posture of the family, and it is not in any way unreasonable. Grief runs on hope until hope stops running. But there is a widening gap between what the family believes and what the investigators, off the record, are preparing for. That gap is the hardest thing about a long missing person case, because agents cannot tell the family what the math is telling them until they have proof. And they cannot get proof on day 172 without a break they do not currently have. So they say still viable. They say active investigation. They say we are following every lead. And every one of those phrases is technically true. And every one of those phrases is doing the work of not saying the harder thing, which is that the reset itself is an acknowledgement that the pursuit is now mostly a recovery operation. Tomorrow is day 173. It will start with a morning briefing at the FBI field office in Phoenix. Case updates from overnight, any new tips from the last 12 hours, any lab results back from the physical evidence reprocessing. Then agents will fan out, some to the Catalina foothills to knock on doors they already knocked on in February, some to the Sheriff's Department to sit in on re-interviews, some to the digital forensics lab in Quantico, where the recovered Nest fragments are still being enhanced. Nothing about it will feel different from day 172 or day 171. That is the cruelest part of a long investigation. The days do not feel like they are moving because they are not. They are repeating. And the family from 3,000 miles away watches the same porch light turn on every night in a house with nobody home to turn it off. I want to end this with something honest. Because most true crime videos at this point in a case either promise a break that is not coming or spiral into speculation. I am not going to do either. Here is the plain truth. Cases like this at the 6-month wall get broken by one of three things. 1, a confession. Someone somewhere tells somebody else what they did, and that somebody else picks up a phone. 2, a physical break, a body, a vehicle, a piece of clothing, something that resurfaces from where it was hidden, usually by weather, by construction, by accident. 3, a digital break, a phone that logs into an old account, a social media post that references a detail only the person who took her would know. A cloud backup that was missed the first time and is now surfaced by the reset. Those are the 3 doors. And the reset the FBI just quietly started is designed very specifically to open the 3rd one, because the first 2 are outside of anyone's control. But the 3rd, the digital one, is the door the Bureau still has a key to. 3 numbers: 172, 13,000, 0. Those numbers will change by tomorrow. The 172 will become 173. The 13,000 will tick up by another 200 tips overnight. The 0 will most likely still be 0. And Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, grandmother, mother of the Today Show anchor, Savannah Guthrie, will still be somewhere none of us can see. The reset is real. The math is real. The gap between hope and reality is real. And the only thing that changes any of it now is the one break the reset is designed to surface. Subscribe if you want to know the second that break comes. And if you have any information about the Guthrie case, any at all, the FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Every tip goes into the same funnel. Everyone gets read. And on day 173, the one that matters is still somewhere waiting to be called in.